The mist swirled around Rhea Quinn's boots as she adjusted her tactical gear, fingers trembling slightly against the cool metal of her standard-issue pulse rifle. At 5'2", she was the smallest member of the Voss 9 expedition team by a considerable margin. The expedition suit hung loosely on her frame, despite the custom adjustments, making her appear even more diminutive among the towering figures of her fellow explorers. "Final equipment check." Commander Soto's voice crackled through her comms. "We drop in 5. Rhea methodically verified her survival pack, oxygen supplements, and scanning equipment. Everything was in place, perfectly organized as always. What she lacked in physical stature, she compensated for with meticulous preparation and an encyclopedic knowledge of xenobiology. Not that anyone on the team seemed to notice or care. "Quinn, try not to get stomped on out there." Lieutenant Mercer's deep voice cut through the channel, followed by several chuckles from the other team members. "Maybe we should tie a balloon to your suit so we can find you if you fall into a footprint." Rhea ignored the comment, focusing instead on the mission briefing displaying on her helmet's visor. Voss 9, a newly discovered exoplanet with Earth-like atmosphere, but twice the oxygen content, supporting megafauna that dwarfed Earth's largest creatures. The primary objective was ecological surveillance and territorial mapping, with special attention to the dominant apex predator that the indigenous species had named in their primitive language, Terax. From the satellite imagery, Terax appeared to be a massive, quadrupedal carnivore with a skeletal structure reminiscent of Earth's prehistoric dire wolves, but with the bulk and musculature of a rhinoceros. Its hide was covered in bioluminescent markings that pulsed with electric blue energy, creating patterns that seemed almost deliberate, like a language written in light. "Atmospheric entry in 3, 2, 1. The ship's AI announced, followed by the familiar stomach-dropping sensation as their vessel punched through Voss 9's thick cloud cover. Rhea steadied herself, gazing through the viewport at the alien landscape below. Massive, purple-hued trees stretched toward the twin moons visible even in daylight, their canopies creating a dense carpet that seemed to ripple like ocean waves in the planet's heavy gravity. Scattered clearings revealed glimpses of enormous creatures moving with surprising grace for their size. "Remember the primary directive," Captain Soto's stern voice reminded them. "Observe and document. No engagement with native fauna unless absolutely necessary for survival. Especially not with Terax." "What's the big deal about this Terax anyway?" Specialist Rodriguez asked, adjusting his weapon. "Just another big predator. We've got enough firepower to handle anything." Dr. Alric, the team's xenobiologist, cleared his throat. "Terax isn't just another big predator. Specialist. According to the indigenous people, it's the only creature they worship as a deity. Their cave paintings depict it with almost human intelligence, capable of complex decision-making and long-term planning. Some even suggest rudimentary tool use." "Great," Mercer groaned. "A smart monster. Just what we needed." The landing was smoother than expected, their vessel settling into a small clearing that the preliminary drones had identified as relatively safe. As the ramp descended, the team was hit with the planet's heavy, humid air, thick with unfamiliar scents and carrying sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Rhea was the last to exit, taking a moment to adjust her equipment to accommodate her smaller frame. By the time she joined the others, they had already begun setting up the base camp perimeter. "Quinn," Captain Soto called, his imposing figure silhouetted against the alien sunset. "You're on first reconnaissance with Mercer and Rodriguez. Stay within 2 clicks of base camp and maintain constant communication." Rhea nodded, ignoring the look of annoyance that passed between the two men. She knew they considered her a liability, a sentiment shared by most of the team. It wasn't just her size. It was the perception that she had only secured her position through academic achievements rather than field experience. What they didn't know was that she had spent 3 years in the treacherous swamps of Venus's terraforming zones, studying adaptations of Earth species to extreme environments. Her small size had been an advantage there, allowing her to access spaces that larger researchers couldn't. As they ventured into the forest, Rhea's senses were overwhelmed by the alien environment. The trees leaked a viscous amber fluid that glowed faintly in the growing darkness. The ground beneath their feet was spongy, almost elastic, with each step producing a barely audible musical tone, as if the entire forest floor was a vast, living instrument responding to their presence. "Keep up, Quinn," Rodriguez called back, his massive frame pushing aside vegetation that immediately snapped back to hit Rhea in the face. "Or are those little legs already tired?" "I'm mapping the bioluminescent patterns," she replied calmly, her scanner recording the rhythmic pulses of light that seemed to follow their movement. "There's a communication network here. The plants are warning each other of our presence." "Yeah, sure," Mercer scoffed. "The plants are talking. Next, you'll tell us they're planning an ambush." Rhea bit back a retort, continuing her scans. The data was fascinating. The bioluminescent pulses were indeed forming patterns consistent with information transfer, similar to neural networks. It wasn't just random defensive reactions. It was coordinated response. They had traveled about a kilometer when the forest suddenly went silent. The musical tones beneath their feet ceased, and the bioluminescent patterns froze in place, creating an eerie, still life tableau around them. "What the hell?" Rodriguez whispered, raising his weapon instinctively. Rhea checked her scanner, noting a rapid drop in ambient electromagnetic activity. "Something's coming," she murmured. "Something big enough to silence the entire ecosystem." "Base camp, this is Reconnaissance Team Alpha." Mercer's voice was steady as he activated his comm. "We've got a situation here. Possible large fauna approach, requesting—" His words were cut short by a roar that seemed to shake the very air around them. It wasn't just loud. It was physically painful, a sound designed to incapacitate prey through sheer acoustic force. Rhea felt her knees buckle as the sound wave hit her, but she remained conscious, watching in horror as both Mercer and Rodriguez collapsed, their larger bodies more susceptible to the sonic attack. Through the trees, she caught glimpses of movement, a massive shape circling their position, the bioluminescent patterns of its hide pulsing in sync with the frozen patterns of the forest. Terax had found them. "Base camp," Rhea whispered into her comm, dragging herself toward her unconscious teammates. "Terax has engaged. Mercer and Rodriguez are down. Requesting immediate—" Static burst through her comms, followed by fragmented words from Captain Soto. "Breaking up. Can't. Position." The comms went dead. Whether it was interference from the dense foliage or some electromagnetic property of Terax itself, they were cut off from base camp. Rhea was alone with 2 unconscious teammates and an apex predator circling their position. She reached Mercer first, checking his vitals. Alive, but completely unresponsive. Rodriguez was the same. His massive frame sprawled awkwardly across a root system that seemed to be slowly wrapping around his limbs. The forest was already beginning to reclaim them. Another roar, closer this time. Rhea could feel the vibrations in her chest, but the intensity was lessened. Either Terax was holding back, or her smaller body mass made her less vulnerable to the sonic attack. Either way, she had to act quickly. She couldn't possibly drag both men back to camp, and staying put meant certain death. The logical choice was clear, but unpalatable. She needed to draw Terax away from her teammates, giving them a chance to recover and escape while buying time for base camp to send reinforcements. Reaching into her pack, she removed a small canister of bioluminescent fluid she had collected earlier. If her theory was correct, the fluid contained chemical markers that the forest used for communication. She quickly dabbed it on her suit in patterns that mimicked those she had observed on Terax's hide, hoping it might confuse the predator's sensory systems. Then, Taking a deep breath, Rhea did the unthinkable. She ran deeper into the forest, away from base camp, away from safety, directly toward where she had last heard Terex's roar. "Come on, you big bastard," she muttered, activating her pulse rifle's power cell to create an electromagnetic signature that would be impossible for the creature to ignore. "Let's see how you handle someone who doesn't play by your rules." As she ran, her comms crackled to life again, catching fragments of conversation from base camp. Quinn's signal moving. "Heading straight for... Crazy little fool. Never survive." The last voice she recognized as Mercer's, apparently recovered enough to rejoin the conversation. "Told you she'd get herself killed. Too small to..." Rhea switched off her comm. She needed to focus, and their doubts would only distract her. The forest around her was changing, the trees growing more sparse, giving way to a rocky terrain dotted with steaming vents that released a sulfurous mist. The perfect hunting ground for an ambush predator. Limited visibility, confusing scent patterns, and multiple heat signatures to mask Terex's approach. She slowed her pace, activating her thermal imaging visor. The landscape lit up in blues and reds, the vents creating a chaotic thermal map that rendered her technology nearly useless. She would have to rely on her other senses. A subtle vibration in the ground to her left made her freeze. Not footsteps. Something larger, like a massive body sliding into position. Rhea slowly turned, raising her pulse rifle, and found herself staring directly into the eyes of Terex. The creature was even more magnificent up close. Standing nearly 15 feet tall at the shoulder, its body was a masterpiece of evolutionary design. Powerful muscles shifting beneath a hide covered in bioluminescent patterns that now pulsed rapidly in what Rhea instinctively recognized as excitement or anticipation. Its head was massive, with multiple rows of teeth visible through partially open jaws. But it was the eyes that captivated her. Intelligent, calculating, and unmistakably curious. For a long moment, predator and human regarded each other in silence. Rhea's finger hovered over the rifle's trigger, but something told her that firing would be a mistake. This wasn't a mindless beast. This was a thinking entity evaluating her. Slowly, deliberately, Rhea lowered her weapon, never breaking eye contact with the creature. Then, drawing on her knowledge of the indigenous people's rituals, she performed the gesture of respect she had studied in their cave paintings. A specific pattern of movement that acknowledged Terex's dominance while requesting safe passage. The creature's head tilted slightly, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to a slower, more deliberate rhythm. It took a step forward, the ground trembling beneath its weight, and lowered its massive head until it was mere feet from Rhea. Hot breath washed over her, carrying the scent of something metallic and strange. Then, without warning, Terex reared back and roared, not the incapacitating sonic attack from before, but a different sound, a call that echoed through the forest. Answering calls came from all directions, dozens of them, each unique, but carrying the same unmistakable signature of Terex's species. Rhea's blood ran cold as she realized the truth. Terex wasn't a solitary apex predator. It was the leader of a pack. Before she could react, Terex turned and bounded away, disappearing into the mist with shocking speed for a creature of its size. The answering calls grew louder, converging on her position. Base camp. Rhea activated her comm, relieved to find the signal had cleared. "This is Quinn. Terex is not solitary. It's a pack hunter. And I think I just got invited to dinner as the main course. I'm heading to the elevated ridge at coordinates 227-584. Send extraction if possible. Quinn, this is Captain Soto. Return to base camp immediately. That's an order." "Negative. Captain. The pack is between me and base camp. My only option is to reach higher ground and hold position until extraction is possible. Mercer and Rodriguez should be recovered by now. Send them to my coordinates with the heavy artillery. There was a pause before Soto responded, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Acknowledged. Extraction team en route. Hold position and stay alive. Quinn. That's the plan, sir, she replied, already scaling the steep incline toward the ridge. The rocky terrain provided less cover, but better visibility, allowing her to spot approaching predators before they reached her. As she climbed, Rhea's mind raced, processing everything she had observed about Terax. The creature had opportunities to kill her, but didn't. The roar that incapacitated her teammates had affected her less severely. The curious examination, rather than immediate attack. The call to the pack, rather than a solo kill. There was a pattern here, if she could just see it clearly. Reaching the ridge, Rhea found herself on a flat plateau, overlooking a vast stretch of the alien forest. From this vantage point, she could see movements among the trees, massive shapes converging on her position, their bioluminescent patterns visible even at this distance. The pack was coordinating, forming a strategic perimeter around the ridge. This wasn't mindless hunting behavior. It was tactical. Base camp, be advised. The pack is displaying coordinated hunting strategies consistent with high-level intelligence. They're cutting off all escape routes from my position. Understood, Quinn. Extraction team is... Captain Soto's voice cut out suddenly, replaced by static. Rhea checked her equipment, finding no obvious malfunction. The interference was external and deliberate. She was being isolated. A movement to her right caught her attention. A smaller Terax, perhaps a juvenile, was already on the ridge, approaching cautiously. Its bioluminescent patterns were different from the adults, more erratic, less controlled. It seemed hesitant, as if this encounter wasn't part of the plan. Acting on instinct, Rhea repeated the ritual gesture she had shown the adult Terax. The juvenile stopped, its head tilting in the same curious manner as its elder. Then, to Rhea's astonishment, it attempted to mimic her gesture, its massive front limb moving in a clumsy approximation of her own movement. "You're learning," she whispered, a slow realization dawning. "You're all learning." The juvenile took another step forward, then froze as a commanding roar echoed from below. The adult Terax appeared at the edge of the ridge, its massive form silhouetted against the alien sky. With a series of short, sharp barks, it directed the juvenile away, sending it scampering back down the incline. Once again, Rhea found herself face to face with the apex predator. This time, however, she had a theory. "You're not hunting me," she said aloud, knowing the creature couldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone might convey her meaning. "You're studying me, just like I'm studying you." Terax's bioluminescent patterns shifted, becoming more symmetrical, more ordered. It took a step forward, then another, each movement deliberate and measured. When it was just a few feet away, it lowered itself to the ground in a position that Rhea recognized from her research. The posture the indigenous people had depicted in their rituals. A position of rest rather than attack. Taking a risk that went against every protocol in the handbook. Rhea sat down as well, mirroring the creature's posture. For several minutes, they simply observed each other, neither making any threatening moves. Then, Terax's hide began to pulse with complex patterns, sequences of light that repeated with slight variations, as if testing Rhea's response. Understanding dawned on her. "You're trying to communicate," she whispered, reaching for her tablet. With quick movements, she pulled up the basic symbol system she had developed for alien encounters and displayed it for Terax to see. Simple geometric shapes representing basic concepts like safety, danger, food, and water. The creature's head moved closer to the screen, its eyes focusing intently on the shifting symbols. After a moment, its hide began to pulse with patterns that roughly approximated the geometrical shapes Rhea had shown it. "Holy shit," she breathed, her hands trembling with excitement. "You're actually—" A burst of pulse fire interrupted her, the energy blast striking the ground near Terax. The creature reared back with a roar of pain and anger as several more shots followed, forcing it to retreat from the ridge. "Quinn, move your ass!" Mercer's voice called out as he appeared at the far end of the plateau, heavy pulse cannon in hand. Rodriguez flanked him, both men advancing with weapons raised. "That thing was about to tear you apart." "Hold your fire!" Rhea shouted, scrambling to her feet. "It wasn't attacking, it was communicating." "Yeah, communicating how it was going to eat you," Rodriguez scoffed, firing another burst as Terax disappeared over the ridge edge. "You're welcome, by the way." "You idiots!" Rhea seethed, watching as Terax's bioluminescent pattern shifted to a rapid, angry pulse before it vanished into the forest below. "Do you have any idea what you just interrupted? It was the first attempt at cross-species communication with an intelligent alien life form." Mercer lowered his weapon, giving her a pitying look. "Quinn, I know you're the brain of this operation, but that thing was an animal, a predator. It was sizing you up for dinner. It had plenty of chances to kill me," she argued, showing them her tablet with the recorded pattern sequences. "Look at this. It was mimicking the symbols I showed it. That's not predatory behavior. That's intelligence." "Save it for the debrief," Rodriguez cut in, activating his comm. "Base camp, this is extraction team. We've secured Quinn. Terax has retreated into the forest, returning to base." As they made their way back, Rhea, silent and fuming between the two larger men. She couldn't shake the feeling that a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity had been destroyed by human arrogance and fear. What she had witnessed wasn't just remarkable. It was revolutionary. Evidence that Terax's species possessed a level of intelligence comparable to Earth's higher primates, possibly even greater. Base camp was a flurry of activity when they arrived, with Captain Soto issuing orders for increased perimeter security. When he spotted Rhea, his expression darkened. "Quinn," he barked, striding toward her. "What part of return to base camp immediately did you fail to understand?" Sir, with all due respect, if I had returned immediately, we would have missed a crucial discovery," she replied, standing her ground despite his towering presence. "Terax's species shows clear signs of intelligent communication and learning behavior. I was establishing first contact when the extraction team interrupted." Captain Soto's eyebrows rose. "First contact? With an animal?" "Not just an animal. Captain," Dr. Alric interjected, approaching with evident interest. "Quinn may be onto something. The indigenous people's reverence for Terax has always suggested more than simple fear of a predator. Their cave paintings depict rituals of communication, exchanges of knowledge." "Doctor, please tell me you're not buying into this fantasy," Soto sighed, rubbing his temple. "We're here to map territory and catalog species, not play diplomat with the local wildlife." "Captain, I recorded the interaction," Rhea said, offering her tablet. "The patterns are structured, repetitive with deliberate variations, consistent with rudimentary symbolic language." Soto glanced at the tablet dismissively. "I'll review it later. Right now, I need everyone focused on security. That thing called its friends, and we have no idea what their intentions are." "I know exactly what their intentions were," Rhea insisted. "They were curious. They were learning about us, just as we're supposed to be learning about them, and we responded with violence. This discussion is over. Quinn." Soto's voice left no room for argument. "Get some rest. We'll debrief in the morning." As the captain walked away, Dr. Alric lingered, his eyes on Rhea's tablet. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the recorded data. She handed it over, grateful for at least one open mind in the expedition. "The patterns changed when I showed it geometric symbols," she explained, as Alric scrolled through the recordings. "It was trying to mimic them, experimenting with communication, The older scientist's eyes widened as he analyzed the sequences. "This is remarkable," he murmured. "The complexity suggests not just mimicry, but comprehension, almost as if it recognized the concept of symbols representing ideas." "Exactly," Rhea nodded eagerly. And when Mercer fired at it, the pattern shifted to something entirely different, more chaotic, but still structured. "I think it was expressing anger or betrayal." "Fascinating." Alric handed back the tablet, his expression thoughtful. "Tomorrow, I'd like you to join me in reviewing all our data on Terax's species. If what you've observed is accurate, we may need to fundamentally reconsider our approach to this planet." Rhea slept fitfully that night, her dreams filled with pulsing lights and alien eyes watching her with intelligence far beyond what humans had attributed to them. She woke before dawn, the alien sun not yet risen, and found the camp unusually quiet. The night watch was at their posts, but there was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. She made her way to the research tent, finding Dr. Alric already awake and reviewing data. The older scientist looked up as she entered, his face grave. "Quinn," he greeted her, gesturing to the holographic display showing thermal imaging of the surrounding forest. "Take a look at this." The image showed dozens of heat signatures surrounding the camp, massive bodies positioned just beyond the perimeter sensors, perfectly still but unmistakably present. The entire Terax pack had encircled them during the night. "They haven't made any aggressive moves," Alric explained, zooming in on one particular signature that was larger than the others. "That one, I believe it's your friend from yesterday, has been in the same position for hours, just watching." "It's not a siege," Rhea realized, studying the pattern. "It's observation. They're learning our behaviors, our patterns." "I agree," Alric nodded. "But Captain Soto sees it as a prelude to attack. He's ordered defensive positions and authorized lethal force if any of them cross the perimeter." "That would be a catastrophic mistake," Rhea said, her mind racing. "We need to communicate, not escalate." Ulrich's expression was sympathetic but resigned. "The captain doesn't share our perspective. I'm afraid he sees intelligent predators as an even greater threat than mindless ones." A commotion outside interrupted them. Rhea rushed to the tent entrance, finding the camp in sudden motion, soldiers moving to defensive positions, weapons charging. "Movement at the perimeter!" someone called out. "Southeast quadrant!" Captain Soto emerged from the command center, fully armed and barking orders. "All personnel to battle stations. Prepare for engagement." Rhea spotted the cause of the alarm. A juvenile Terax, smaller than the others but still massive by human standards, had approached the camp's edge. Its bioluminescent patterns were pulsing rapidly, almost frantically. It wasn't threatening. It was distressed. Without thinking, Rhea broke from the tent and ran toward the perimeter, ignoring the shouts behind her. "Quinn, get back here!" Soto's voice thundered, but she didn't stop. The juvenile Terax spotted her, its patterns shifting to the same curious sequence she had observed the day before. It took a hesitant step forward, then another, clearly recognizing her. "Hold your fire!" she shouted, raising her hands to the expedition team. "It's trying to communicate." She reached the perimeter line, standing between the defensive positions and the young alien creature, its massive head lowered to her level, eyes blinking with that same eerie intelligence she had seen in the adult. "What is it?" she asked softly, knowing it couldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone might convey her question. "What are you trying to tell us?" The juvenile's hide pulsed with a pattern she hadn't seen before. Rapid, asymmetrical flashes concentrated on one side of its body. It turned, revealing a massive wound on its flank, not from pulse weapons or natural predators, but something else entirely. The edges were too clean, too precise. "It's injured," she called back to the team. But not by any natural cause. This was done by a blade or laser cutter. Dr. Alric had followed her to the perimeter, his medical scanner already active. She's right, he confirmed, his voice tight with concern. That's a surgical incision, partially healed but recently reopened. Someone has been experimenting on this creature. The implications hit Rhea like a physical blow. They weren't the first humans on this planet. Someone else had been here. Someone who viewed the Terrax not as intelligent beings to be studied and respected, but as subjects for experimentation. The juvenile suddenly jerked its head up, its patterns shifting to a warning pulse. A moment later, the adult Terrax appeared at the forest edge, moving with surprising silence for its size. Upon seeing Rhea and the wounded juvenile, it stopped, its own patterns pulsing in what she now recognized as concern. "Captain," Rhea said, not taking her eyes off the adult Terrax. "I need permission to approach the adult. I think it brought the juvenile to us for help." "Absolutely not," Soto replied, his rifle trained on the massive predator. "Both of you, get back behind the defensive line, now." "Sir," Dr. Alric interjected, "this is unprecedented behavior. If they're seeking medical assistance, it suggests not only intelligence but a recognition of our technological capabilities. We have an ethical obligation to—" "Our obligation is to the safety of this expedition," Soto cut him off. "And I'm not risking human lives on a theory about alien intelligence." The adult Terrax took another step forward, causing several soldiers to tighten their grips on their weapons. Its patterns shifted to the same sequence it had shown Rhea on the ridge, the attempt at communication. Making a decision that would either make history or end her career, possibly her life. Rhea stepped forward, beyond the perimeter, directly toward the two Terrax. "Quinn!" Soto's voice was a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Return to position immediately." She ignored him, continuing her careful approach. The adult Terrax remained still, watching her with those intelligent eyes. When she was halfway between the camp and the creatures, she stopped and slowly extended her hand, palm up, a universal gesture of peace. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. Then, with deliberate slowness, the adult Terrax lowered its massive body to the ground, assuming the same rest position it had shown her on the ridge. The juvenile followed suit, though its movements were hampered by its injury. Rhea turned back to the expedition team, making eye contact with Dr. Alric. "I need a medical kit," she called. "They're asking for our help." Alric hesitated, glancing at Captain Soto, whose face had turned a dangerous shade of red. But something in Rhea's certainty must have convinced him, because he nodded and hurried back to the medical tent, returning moments later with a portable treatment unit. "This is insubordination," Soto growled as Alric passed the perimeter. "Both of you will face court-martial when we return." "Noted, sir," Rhea replied calmly, taking the medical kit from Alric. "But, right now, we have a chance to make first contact with an intelligent alien species. I think that's worth the risk." Together, they approached the two Terrax. The adult watched them intently, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to a slower, more regular pulse that Rhea interpreted as an attempt to appear non-threatening. The juvenile's patterns mimicked the adult's, though occasionally interrupted by erratic flashes that seemed to correspond with pain from its wound. "I'll need to clean and treat the incision," Alric murmured, scanning the wound more thoroughly. "It's infected, but our broad-spectrum antibiotics should be effective based on the preliminary biological analysis we've done." Rhea nodded, maintaining eye contact with the adult Terrax. "I think it understands that we're trying to help," she said softly. "Look at how still it's keeping the juvenile." Indeed, the adult had positioned itself to gently restrain the younger creature, one massive paw holding it in place with surprising gentleness. As Alric began treating the wound, the juvenile flinched, but remained relatively still. Occasional whimpers escaping, but no violent movements. The incision was made with surgical precision, Ulrich noted as he worked. And there are signs of previous tissue samples being taken. Someone has been using these creatures as research subjects. But who? Rhea wondered, her eyes still on the adult Terax. We're supposed to be the first expedition to Voss 9. The official first expedition, Ulrich corrected grimly. There have always been rumors of corporate Black Ops missions to promising exoplanets. Advanced teams sent to assess potential for resource extraction or biotech harvesting before the official surveys. The implications were disturbing. If a corporate entity had established a secret presence on Voss 9, experimenting on the native fauna without oversight or ethical constraints, it would explain the Terax's initial hostility toward humans. It would also explain their apparent understanding of human technological capabilities. They had encountered humans before, just not friendly ones. As Ulrich finished treating the wound, applying a synthetic skin graft that would dissolve as the natural healing process took over, the juvenile's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a steady, rhythmic pulse. The adult Terax's patterns synchronized with it, creating a harmonious visual display that Rhea instinctively understood as gratitude. "They're thanking us," she said softly, a smile spreading across her face despite the gravity of the situation. "Doctor, do you have your tablet? I want to try something." Ulrich handed over his device, which Rhea quickly configured to display the same symbolic language she had shown the adult Terax the day before. This time, however, she added a new symbol, a simple representation of healing, showing a broken line becoming whole. She held the tablet where both Terax could see it, watching as their attention focused on the display. The adult's patterns shifted, approximating the healing symbol with remarkable accuracy. Then, to her astonishment, it added a new pattern, one that alternated between the shape of a Terax and something that resembled a human figure. "It's building on the language," Ulrich breathed, his scientific detachment momentarily overcome by wonder. "It's not just mimicking, it's adding new concepts, alliance, perhaps, or friendship." The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching footsteps. Captain Soto had evidently lost patience and was coming to retrieve his wayward team members personally, flanked by Mercer and Rodriguez with weapons at the ready. The adult Terax immediately tensed, its patterns shifting to a warning display. The juvenile pressed closer to it, clearly frightened by the approaching humans with their raised weapons. "Stop where you are, Captain," Rhea called out, positioning herself between the expedition team and the Terax. "We've just established peaceful contact. Don't ruin it by threatening them." "You've exceeded your authority, Quinn," Soto replied, his voice dangerously calm. "Step aside and return to base camp. That's an order." "Sir, with all respect, you need to see what we've discovered," she persisted, gesturing to the tablet still displaying the symbolic exchange. "They're intelligent, communicative beings, and someone else has been here, experimenting on them. We have evidence." Soto hesitated, his gaze shifting between Rhea, Ulrich, and the two Terax. For a moment, she thought he might listen to reason. Then his expression hardened. "Mercer, Rodriguez, escort Quinn and Dr. Ulrich back to camp. We'll discuss this situation after securing our perimeter." Before anyone could move, the adult Terax rose to its full height, towering over the humans. Its bioluminescent patterns pulsed with a new intensity, and a low growl vibrated through the air, not threatening, but commanding attention. Then, with deliberate slowness, it turned and nudged the juvenile, directing it back toward the forest. At the edge of the trees, the adult Terax paused and looked back, its patterns forming a sequence that Rhea now recognized, the symbol for communication, followed by the symbol it had created for human and Terax together. A message: "We will speak again." Then both creatures disappeared into the forest, leaving the humans in stunned silence. "What just happened?" Mercer asked, lowering his weapon slightly. "First contact," Rhea replied, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. "And they just told us they'll be back." Captain Soto's face was unreadable as he ordered everyone back to camp. Once inside the perimeter, he called an immediate briefing, gathering the entire expedition team in the command center. "Dr. Alric and Specialist Quinn have made a rather extraordinary claim," he began, his tone neutral but skeptical. "They believe the Terrax possess intelligence comparable to human levels, and that someone else has been conducting unauthorized experiments on them. I want all evidence presented now, before we decide how to proceed." Rhea and Alric took turns explaining what they had observed: the structured communication patterns, the deliberate seeking of medical assistance, the surgical wounds that could only have been made by advanced technology. As they spoke, Rhea noticed the expressions of the team shifting from disbelief to uncertainty, and in some cases, to dawning realization. "If Quinn is right," Lieutenant Park, the expedition's security chief, said slowly, "then our first night here makes more sense. The perimeter sensors detected movement all around us, but nothing ever approached or attacked. They were studying us, learning our patterns. And the indigenous people's reverence for them," added cultural specialist Navarro. "It always seemed odd that they would worship a predator unless there was something special about it. Intelligence would explain their relationship." Captain Soto remained silent throughout, his expression thoughtful. When everyone had spoken, he finally addressed the team. "If, and I stress if, Quinn and Alric are correct, we face two immediate concerns. First, how do we establish formal communication with a potentially intelligent alien species? And second, who else is on this planet conducting unauthorized experiments? And what are their intentions?" He turned to Rhea, his earlier anger seemingly replaced by grudging respect. "Quinn, you've established the initial contact. I'm assigning you and Dr. Alric to develop a more comprehensive communication protocol. The rest of the team will focus on locating any signs of another human presence on this planet." Rhea nodded, surprised, but grateful for the captain's change of heart. "Thank you, sir. I believe we can build on the symbolic language we've already established. With time, we might even—" She was interrupted by a sudden alarm from the perimeter sensors. Park rushed to the monitoring station, his face paling as he read the incoming data. "Multiple large signatures approaching from all directions," he reported. "But they're not Terrax. These are mechanical vehicles of some kind, moving fast." "Battle stations," Soto ordered, the command center erupting into activity. "Defensive perimeter, non-lethal deterrence first. I want to know who these people are before we start a shooting war." Rhea followed the captain outside, where the expedition team was rapidly deploying to defensive positions. Through her tactical visor, she could see the approaching vehicles, sleek, heavily armored transports bearing a corporate logo she didn't recognize, moving with the confidence of those who knew exactly what they were doing. "Human Syndicate," Dr. Alric murmured beside her, his face grim. "I've heard rumors. They operate beyond UEF jurisdiction, harvesting biological materials from unexplored worlds for pharmaceutical research. No ethics, no oversight, just profit." The vehicles formed a circle around the expedition's camp, maintaining a distance just beyond effective weapons range. A tense standoff ensued, neither side making a move to engage. Then, a hatch opened on the lead vehicle, and a single figure emerged, a tall, immaculately dressed man whose very posture radiated authority. "Captain Soto," the man called, his voice amplified to carry across the distance. "I am Director Vance of the Syndicate Research Division. Your presence here is unexpected but not entirely unwelcome. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement that benefits both our organizations." Soto stepped forward, his weapon lowered but ready. "This planet is under United Earth Federation protection for scientific survey only. Your presence here is unauthorized and illegal. Vance smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Legality is such a flexible concept beyond Earth's reach. Captain, we've been established on Vos 9 for nearly a year, studying its unique biological offerings. The Terrax, in particular, have proven fascinating subjects. Rhea felt a cold anger building as she listened. This was the man responsible for the wounded juvenile, for treating intelligent beings as mere research material. Before she could stop herself, she stepped forward beside Captain Soto. "You've been experimenting on sentient creatures," she accused, her voice carrying clearly across the open space. "The Terrax aren't just animals. They're intelligent, communicative beings. What you're doing isn't just illegal. It's an atrocity." Vance's attention shifted to her, his expression amused. "Ah, the passionate young xenobiologist. I've reviewed your file. Specialist Quinn. Brilliant but naive. The Terrax are indeed remarkable specimens, but sentience is a bold claim without substantial evidence." "We have the evidence," she countered, gesturing to Dr. Alric, who held up his tablet displaying the recorded communication patterns. Structured symbolic language, cooperative social behavior, problem-solving abilities, all indicators of advanced intelligence. "Interesting theories," Vance replied dismissively, "but ultimately irrelevant to our work here. The Terrax's biochemistry contains compounds with extraordinary regenerative properties. Their value to human medicine far outweighs any philosophical concerns about their cognitive capabilities." Captain Soto's posture had subtly shifted during this exchange, moving slightly in front of Rhea as if to shield her. "Director Vance, I suggest you and your people pack up and leave Vos 9 immediately. When we return to Earth, I will be filing a full report on your activities here." Vance's smile widened, becoming predatory. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Captain. You see, your discovery complicates our operation considerably. We can't have the UEF declaring this a protected planet due to indigenous intelligence. It would cost us billions in potential revenue." With a subtle gesture from Vance, the weapon systems on the Syndicate vehicles activated, training on the expedition camp. "So I'm offering you a choice. Join our operation with generous compensation, or resist and face the consequences. Your official mission parameters give you no authority to interfere with private enterprise." The standoff intensified, neither side willing to back down. Rhea's mind raced, searching for a solution that wouldn't end in bloodshed. Then, a familiar sound cut through the tension, a roar that shook the very air, followed by dozens more from all directions. The Terrax had returned, and they had brought the entire pack. They emerged from the forest like living shadows, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in perfect synchronization, a unified organism with dozens of bodies moving as one. At their head was the adult that had communicated with Rhea, its massive form instantly recognizable. The wounded juvenile was nowhere to be seen, presumably kept safely away from the confrontation. Director Vance's confident expression faltered slightly as he observed the Terrax's coordinated approach. "Fascinating," he murmured. "They've never displayed this level of organized behavior before." "Because you never tried to communicate with them," Rhea replied, a realization dawning. "You treated them as test subjects, not as equals." They responded accordingly. The Terrax formed a circle around both human groups, effectively surrounding the standoff without directly intervening. Their presence created an eerie tableau, humans with their technology and weapons suddenly dwarfed by the silent, watching predators whose intelligence they had underestimated. The lead Terrax approached, moving with deliberate slowness until it stood directly between the expedition team and the Syndicate forces. Its massive head turned, regarding each group in turn, its bioluminescent patterns shifting between what Rhea now recognized as the symbols for communication and warning. "It's offering a choice," she said softly, but loud enough for both groups to hear. "Peaceful interaction or conflict. It's giving us the same choice we give each other." Director Vance's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. With a subtle hand signal, the Syndicate weapons adjusted their targeting, now aiming at the Terrax instead of the expedition team. "These creatures are valuable research subjects. Nothing more," he stated flatly. "If they're interfering with our operation, they become obstacles to be removed." The lead Terrax's patterns shifted instantly, and a ripple of response moved through the entire pack, a communication network transmitting information faster than human technology could track. Before Vance could give the order to fire, the Terrax moved with coordinated precision. They didn't attack directly. Instead, each one positioned itself strategically, using their massive bodies to block weapon sightlines or create gaps in the Syndicate perimeter. It wasn't aggression. It was tactical disruption, executed with an understanding of human technology that could only come from careful observation. "Hold fire!" Vance ordered, suddenly uncertain. "Maintain positions." The lead Terrax turned toward Rhea, its patterns forming the now familiar symbol for communication, followed by a new pattern she hadn't seen before. It took her a moment to recognize what it was suggesting. "It wants me to speak for them," she realized aloud, turning to Captain Soto. "Sir, I think they're offering an alliance against the Syndicate, but they need someone to translate their intentions." Soto hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Do it, Quinn, but be careful." Rhea stepped forward, positioning herself beside the lead Terrax, who lowered its massive head to her level in what she now understood was a gesture of respect. Taking a deep breath, she addressed both human groups. "The Terrax are intelligent beings with their own society and communication system," she began, her voice steady despite the tension. "They've observed humans since the Syndicate arrived and have learned our behaviors, our technologies, and our divisions. They understand that some of us," she gestured to the expedition team, "seek knowledge through observation and respect, while others," her gaze shifted to Vance, "seek to exploit and harm." The lead Terrax's patterns pulsed in what seemed like confirmation, encouraging her to continue. "They're offering us a choice, all of us. Leave this planet in peace, respecting their territory and sovereignty, or face unified resistance from a species that has evolved to be the perfect predator in this environment. A species that now understands our weaknesses and limitations." Director Vance's confident facade had cracked, revealing the calculation beneath. His eyes darted between Rhea, the Terrax, and his own forces, weighing options and probabilities. "An interesting performance, Specialist Quinn," he finally said. "But I see no evidence of this supposed intelligence beyond basic pack behavior and coincidental timing." As if in direct response to his skepticism, the lead Terrax's patterns shifted to display a perfect reproduction of the Syndicate's corporate logo, followed by images that unmistakably represented their research facilities hidden in the forest. It was a message even Vance couldn't misinterpret. "We know where you are. We know what you're doing." "That's not possible," Vance murmured, his composure finally breaking. "They couldn't have." "They've been watching you for months," Rhea interpreted, understanding flowing between her and the Terrax with increasing ease. "Learning, adapting, waiting for the right moment. They could have wiped out your facilities at any time, but they were studying you first, just as you thought you were studying them." The revelation hung in the air, changing the dynamic of the confrontation entirely. It was no longer humans with superior technology facing primitive alien creatures. It was two intelligent species meeting as potential equals, with the Terrax holding the advantage of numbers and environmental adaptation. Captain Soto stepped forward, making a decision that would change the course of human-alien relations forever. "Director Vance, Your operation on Voss 9 is hereby terminated, under the authority of the United Earth Federation. You and your people will leave this planet immediately and face charges for unauthorized exploitation of a protected biosphere. Vance's expression hardened, but the calculation in his eyes told Rhea he had already assessed the situation and found it untenable. The Syndicate forces were outnumbered by the combined presence of the expedition team and the Terrax pack, with no guarantee their weapons would be effective against the alien predators at close range. "This isn't over, Captain," Vance said coldly. "The Syndicate has interests throughout explored space. Your career and your mission will not survive this interference." "Perhaps," Soto replied evenly. "But the truth about Voss 9 and the Terrax will, and that's what matters in the end." With a final glare of contempt, Vance retreated to his vehicle, the Syndicate forces following his lead. Within minutes, the armored transports had disappeared into the forest, leaving the expedition team alone with the Terrax pack. The tension didn't immediately dissipate. The Terrax maintained their positions, their patterns now pulsing in what Rhea interpreted as uncertainty or caution. The lead Terrax approached her again, its massive head lowering until they were eye to eye. Understanding what was being asked of her, Rhea turned to Captain Soto. "They want to know if we're different, if we'll honor their intelligence and territory, or if we'll eventually become like the Syndicate." Soto considered his response carefully, aware that this moment would set the precedent for all future human-Terrax interactions. "Tell them we came to learn, not to take," he finally said. "We will respect their boundaries and report their intelligence to our people. No human will harm them again without facing our justice." Rhea conveyed this promise as best she could through the symbolic language they had developed, adding the gesture of respect she had learned from the indigenous people's rituals. The lead Terrax watched her intently, its intelligent eyes seeming to look beyond her words to judge the truth of her intent. Then, in a moment that would be recorded in the annals of xenobiology forever, the massive predator lowered itself to the ground in a deliberate motion, front limbs extended in what could only be described as a bow or genuflection. One by one, the rest of the pack followed suit, creating a circle of kneeling apex predators around the human expedition team. "They're acknowledging the agreement," Rhea whispered, awe in her voice. "It's a ritual of their own, recognition between equals." The expedition team stood in stunned silence, witnessing something no human had seen before: the voluntary submission of an alien apex predator, not out of fear or weakness, but as a conscious choice between intelligent species. After maintaining the position for several moments, the lead Terrax rose and turned toward the forest. With a final pulse of bioluminescent communication that Rhea recognized as a promise to return, it led the pack away, disappearing among the alien vegetation as silently as they had appeared. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. The expedition team split into specialized groups, one tracking the Syndicate's withdrawal to ensure they actually left the planet, another documenting the Terrax's behavior and communication patterns, and a third establishing protocols for peaceful interaction with the intelligent species. Rhea worked tirelessly with Dr. Alric to develop a more comprehensive symbolic language for human Terrax communication. Each day, the lead Terrax would return, sometimes alone, sometimes with others of its pack, to engage in the linguistic experiments. The progress was remarkable. Within a week, they had established nearly 100 shared symbols, representing basic concepts. "The rate of learning is unprecedented," Alric noted as they reviewed the day's recordings. "They're not just memorizing symbols, they're grasping the underlying principles of symbolic representation. Some of them are even creating new symbols to express concepts we haven't covered yet." Rhea nodded, still processing the magnitude of their discovery. "It makes me wonder what else we've missed in our exploration of the galaxy. How many other species have we dismissed as merely animals when they might have been trying to communicate all along?" The question haunted her, a mixture of excitement at what lay ahead and regret for opportunities potentially lost through human arrogance. But there was no time to dwell on the past, not when the present offered such extraordinary possibilities. 10 days after the confrontation with the syndicate, Captain Soto called the team together for an announcement. "We've received new orders from UEF Command," he informed them, his expression unusually solemn. "Based on our preliminary reports, VOS 9 has been designated a protected intelligence zone. All human activity here will be strictly regulated, with mandatory training in Terax communication protocols before anyone is allowed planetside." A murmur of approval ran through the team. It was the outcome they had hoped for: official recognition of the Terax's intelligence and the protections that came with it. Additionally, Soto continued, Specialist Quinn has been promoted to lead xenolinguist for the VOS 9 project. She will remain here with a specialized team when the rest of us return to Earth to present our findings. Rhea felt a surge of pride, mixed with trepidation. The responsibility was enormous, serving as the primary bridge between humanity and an alien intelligence. But it was exactly what she had trained for, what she had always dreamed of doing. The captain wasn't finished. "One final item. The syndicate transport we've been tracking has left the system, but we've detected unusual activity at their abandoned research facility. Dr. Alric and Quinn will accompany me to investigate tomorrow. Prepare for potentially hazardous conditions." The following morning found them approaching the syndicate's former base of operations, a complex of prefabricated structures nestled in a valley several kilometers from the expedition camp. As they drew closer, the reason for Soto's concern became apparent. The facility had been partially destroyed, with signs of deliberate sabotage rather than hasty abandonment. "They didn't want us to see what they were working on," Alric surmised as they picked their way through the wreckage. Classic corporate scorched earth protocol when withdrawing from an unauthorized operation. Rhea's attention was drawn to a section of the complex that appeared more intact than the rest. A reinforced structure with heavy security doors that had resisted the demolition charges. "Captain, I think we should focus on this building," she suggested, pointing to the unusual reinforcement. Whatever they considered most valuable or sensitive would have been kept here. With careful application of the expedition's cutting equipment, they managed to breach the sealed entrance. Inside, they found a laboratory that had been hastily evacuated, but not completely destroyed. Specimen containers lined the walls, most empty, but some still holding preserved tissue samples from various VOS 9 species. Computer terminals sat dark and silent, their data cores removed to prevent information recovery. But it was the central chamber that revealed the true nature of the syndicate's research. A massive containment unit dominated the space, large enough to hold a full-grown Terax, with monitoring equipment and surgical apparatus positioned around it. The restraint systems were industrial-grade, designed to immobilize something with the strength of an apex predator. They weren't just taking samples. Rhea realized, horror dawning as she examined the equipment. They were conducting full-scale vivisection and neurological experiments on intelligent beings. And not just adults, Alric added grimly, holding up a smaller restraint designed for a juvenile. They were studying developmental differences, probably trying to understand how the Terax's intelligence and communication abilities evolved. Captain Soto's expression was one of controlled fury as he surveyed the laboratory. "Document everything," he ordered. "Every piece of equipment, every sample container, every procedural note you can find. This isn't just corporate exploitation anymore. It's a crime against an intelligent species. The UEF Security Council needs to see exactly what happened here." As they worked, Rhea noticed a datapad that had been overlooked in the evacuation, wedged beneath a console where it had apparently fallen during the hasty departure. Activating it, she found it partially intact, with fragments of research notes and experimental logs still accessible. "Captain, Doctor, you need to see this," she called, her voice tight with suppressed anger. The others gathered around as she displayed the recovered data: video logs of experiments conducted on captured Terax, notes on their responses to pain and stress, analyses of their attempts to communicate with their captors. "They knew," she whispered, scrolling through the damning evidence. "They recognized signs of intelligence months ago, but classified it as irrelevant to research objectives. They deliberately ignored the ethical implications, because acknowledging Terax sentience would have made their work illegal." Soto's jaw tightened as he reviewed the logs. "This goes beyond the syndicate," he said after a moment. "These research parameters, the experimental protocols, they're consistent with military applications. Someone in the UEF Defense Department may have been backing this operation unofficially." The implications were staggering. A conspiracy reaching from corporate boardrooms to the highest levels of Earth's government, all to exploit an intelligent species before its status could be officially recognized and protected. As they continued their investigation, a sound from outside caught their attention, a familiar roar that Rhea now recognized as the lead Terax's call. They emerged from the facility to find the massive creature waiting, its bioluminescent patterns pulsing with what Rhea had learned to interpret as impatience or urgency. "It wants us to follow," she translated, recognizing the directional indicators in its pattern. "I think it wants to show us something." After a brief consultation, they agreed to follow the Terax, maintaining communication with the base camp as they traveled deeper into the forest than any of them had ventured before. The terrain became increasingly difficult, with steaming vents and unstable ground that the Terax navigated with ease, but posed challenges for the humans. After nearly an hour of travel, they reached their destination, a massive cave entrance hidden behind a waterfall of iridescent liquid that seemed to bend light in unusual ways. The Terax paused at the entrance, its pattern shifting to what Rhea now recognized as an invitation or welcome. "It wants us to enter," she said, glancing at Soto and Alric. "I believe this is significant. Perhaps their primary dwelling or a sacred site." Soto hesitated, understandably cautious about entering an unknown cave system on an alien planet. "Can we trust that it's safe?" "If they wanted to harm us, they've had ample opportunity," Alric pointed out. "I believe this is an extension of trust on their part, showing us something they consider important." With a nod of agreement, Soto led them through the waterfall, the strange liquid sliding off their expedition suits without leaving residue. Inside, the cave opened into a vast chamber illuminated by bioluminescent fungi that cast an ethereal blue glow over everything. But it wasn't the natural beauty that captured their attention. It was what the chamber contained. Along the walls, extending as far as they could see, were patterns etched into the stone, symbols and images that unmistakably formed a written language or historical record. Some appeared ancient, worn by time, while others were clearly recent additions. And interspersed among them were images that could only represent humans, the first crude representations perhaps dating back hundreds of years, with increasingly detailed and accurate depictions appearing more recently. "They've been recording our interactions with them," Rhea realized, moving closer to examine the markings. Not just the syndicate, but earlier human contact, explorers or crash survivors that never made it back to report what they found. "This is beyond anything we imagined," Alric breathed, his scientific detachment momentarily overwhelmed by wonder. "This isn't just intelligence. This is civilization, record-keeping, historical memory, cultural transmission across generations." The lead Terax moved to a section of the wall that appeared to be the most recent additions. There, clearly visible, was a depiction of Rhea standing beside the massive predator, with symbols that she recognized from their communication sessions surrounding the image. But it was what came next that took her breath away. A new set of symbols that showed humans and Terax together, sharing knowledge, with patterns that suggested growth and expansion. "It's not just recording the past," she whispered, understanding dawning. "It's envisioning a future, cooperation between our species." The lead Terax confirmed her interpretation with a pattern of approval, then moved to another section of the chamber, where a group of juveniles were gathered around an older member of the pack. As the humans watched, the elder began to pulse with complex patterns that the juveniles attempted to mimic. A teaching session, the transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next. "This changes everything," Captain Soto said quietly, the full implications finally sinking in. "They're not just intelligent. They have a complex society with education, history, and forward planning. The UEF will have to establish full diplomatic relations, not just protection status." The lead Terax approached Rhea once more, its massive head lowering to her level in what she now understood was a gesture of respect between equals. Its patterns formed a sequence she recognized, the symbols for human and Terax, followed by communication, followed by a new symbol that seemed to represent something greater than either species alone. "Alliance," she translated, looking up at the enormous predator with newfound understanding. "It's proposing a formal alliance between our species." In that moment, standing in the ancient cave with the apex predator of Voss 9, Rhea felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. She was no longer just a scientist or explorer. She had become something unprecedented, an ambassador between humanity and the first truly alien intelligence they had encountered. With careful deliberation, she performed the gesture of respect she had learned, then added the symbols for agreement and future. The lead Terax's patterns pulsed with what she now recognized as satisfaction or pleasure, and it repeated the gesture, sealing the informal first agreement between their species. As they prepared to return to the expedition camp, Rhea found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From being mocked for her small stature to standing as the bridge between two intelligent species. It was a transformation she could never have anticipated but now embraced with all her heart. The return journey to Earth would come soon enough, with debriefings and reports and the inevitable political complications that would arise from their discovery. The Syndicate would fight to discredit their findings, and whoever had supported their illegal operation from within the UEF would move to protect themselves from exposure. But none of that mattered compared to what they had achieved here. Recognition and respect for an intelligence so different from their own, yet equally worthy of dignity and self-determination. And perhaps most importantly, the beginning of what could become the most significant partnership in human history. As they emerged from the forest into the clearing where the expedition base was located, the twin moons of Voss 9 hung low in the sky, casting dual shadows across the alien landscape. The lead Terax paused at the edge of the clearing, its massive form silhouetted against the moons. Then, in a gesture that would be recorded and studied by xenobiologists for generations to come, it lowered itself to the ground in that now familiar posture of respect, not submission, but acknowledgement between equals. One by one, the rest of the pack emerged from the forest to join it, creating a circle of kneeling apex predators under the alien sky. Captain Soto turned to Rhea, genuine respect in his eyes. "It seems they've chosen their ambassador," he said quietly. "And so have we." Rhea nodded, her gaze fixed on the magnificent creatures that had once been feared as mindless predators and were now recognized as their intellectual peers. They had mocked her size, these humans who thought strength was measured only in physical terms. But the apex predator of Voss 9 had seen beyond such limited thinking, recognizing in her the qualities that truly mattered: patience, empathy, and the willingness to look beyond appearances to the intelligence within. As the lead Terax rose and led its pack back into the forest, Rhea knew that her journey was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, misunderstandings and setbacks, the inevitable friction that comes when two vastly different species attempt to build a relationship. But watching the bioluminescent patterns fade into the darkness, she felt a certainty that transcended logic or evidence, a bone-deep knowing that this connection between human and Terrax would change both species for the better. Opening possibilities neither could achieve alone. And it had all begun because she, the smallest human on the expedition, had been willing to look up at the largest predator on the planet and see not a monster, but a mind worthy of respect. In the end, perhaps that was the most important lesson of VOS 9, that true strength lay not in physical power or technological advancement, but in the courage to recognize intelligence wherever it might exist, and the wisdom to approach it with open hands rather than weapons raised. As she turned to follow Captain Soto and Dr. Alric back to the base camp, Rhea smiled to herself. Sometimes, it took the smallest person to forge the biggest connections, and in this case, to kneel before an apex predator and rise as its equal.